This is The Big Breakdown, a long look back at some of the biggest stories we're covering for you at the Hidden Killers podcast and True Crime Today. This is Hidden Killers with Tony Brueski. Here now, Tony Brueski.
There is something deeply wrong with a system that keeps giving Bryan Kohberger new ways to take up oxygen. There is. This is one of those stories. It's not even so much about Kohberger. It's, again, about how we have such a deeply flawed system that allows for monsters to thrive. Even after they've admitted guilt, after we've locked them away permanently, the rights that we still allow them to have, the manipulation, the tactics, the access to other human beings, to other people's time, energy, goodwill, and in this case, lack of choice, but to do their jobs because the system is built the way it is. Bryan Kohberger, he's not the first one to find ways of hijacking the system to his own screwed up way of thinking. We're going to talk about what's going on right now. This is not a rehash of old information, of new pieces in the puzzle that have been released by the police, by investigators, by whoever it may be. This is a new development in the damn story. You ready? Let's go through it. And in the comments section, let me know what you think. Tell me your thoughts, and please do hit subscribe as well. Do it right now so you don't forget and you don't miss any of our coverage in this. The murders he committed should have been the end of this story. 4 young lives stolen, a community shattered, and a courtroom that finally said, enough! But somehow the system that promised closure to the families of Kaylee Goncalves, Madison Mogen, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin just keeps churning. New motions, new filings, new hearings. What? I thought he couldn't do that. Yeah. We can't really technically file an appeal, but this is not an appeal. This is, I don't want to do what you've already said I have to do. Somebody else already did it for me. All these things stamped with Kohberger's name. And what's worse, every one of those filings forces his own defense attorneys to keep showing up, to keep billing hours, to keep representing a man whose guilt isn't in question anymore. And I want to make this clear. This is in no way a dig at his attorneys. And I think that's very important to understand in all this because everybody's looking for a scapegoat here. Everybody's looking for someone to blame. How could this be happening? Well, those attorneys are just money hungry. They're out there trying to get... They're doing their job. And you know what? They don't have a choice. They can't just walk away from Kohberger because he's icky. No, they are state appointed. And they have a vested interest in keeping their law license and not destroying their own lives and livelihoods because of a madman. This story this time started when Kohberger's lawyers filed a motion saying he shouldn't have to pay restitution to the victims' families. Their argument? The families receive money through GoFundMe. Therefore, the expenses the prosecution is seeking aren't true economic losses under Idaho law. This is according to Kohberger. That filing, as tone deaf as it is. And let's not make any mistake here. His attorneys, I don't think, are sitting back there going, how can we really protect Kohberger and let him make a bunch of money after these horrible crimes that he's admitted to committing? No. If you're his attorney, you're appointed by law, and you have to represent, and ultimately, he is the one who makes the calls, Kohberger. It's not the attorneys. If he's figured out, or in his mind thinks he's figured out, well, GoFundMe should cover these people, not me, and he says to his attorneys that you need to file this, they have to file that. That's how that works. It's offensive on its face. It's arrogant. It's another slap in the face to families who've already endured more pain than anyone should have to. But here's the uncomfortable truth most people aren't talking about. The attorneys who signed that motion, Ann Taylor, Jay Weston Lodgson, and John Baldwin, they don't have a choice. Under Idaho law, once a public defender or court-appointed attorney takes on a case, they don't get to walk away just because their client is guilty, sentenced, or universally despised, or looked at as the devil. Well, they could quit. Yes. Yes, they could. And you could quit your job, too, the moment your boss says you need to do this. And then never be allowed to work in your field ever again. They knew, as attorneys, what they were signing up for, that they would be in situations like this. And they understand the law deeper than we do, because it's what they do. It's one of those, I'm going to yield to your expertise type things that people don't like doing anymore, because, of course, everyone's their own expert today. Don't be mad at the attorneys. Be mad at the system. Be mad at the system that forces them to have to file this sort of shit. If you want some sort of change, that's where it is. It's not on these attorneys. Idaho Criminal Rule 44.1 makes it clear defense counsel may withdraw only with court approval, and only if the court finds good cause. The standard isn't, I'd rather not, he's a piece of shit. It's not even the case is over. It's the court decides. And again, if you'd like to continue practicing law, what your life is based on, your career, your passion, then you have to follow the rules to which our system works. Fix the system. So when the judge sentenced Kohberger to 4 consecutive life terms in July, that didn't automatically set his attorneys free. No, it actually locked them in further. Because once the plea was entered and the death penalty was off the table, the case moved into a kind of procedural limbo. The post-conviction phase, where there are still motions to file, restitution to dispute, records to correct, and rights to preserve 4 potential appeals. I thought he couldn't get an appeal. You're right. You're exactly right. So we thought the same thing of the Menendez brothers. We thought the same thing of so many other cases. It's crossing your T's and dotting your I's. And they are doing that. It is their job. And if Kohberger tells his lawyers, file this motion, and it's not clearly frivolous or illegal, they are obligated to do it. This is frivolous and illegal. No, it's not. It's heartless. It's insane. That's a lot of lawsuits. They're obligated to do this. That's not a choice. That is a duty. This is what people outside the legal world often miss. Once the system appoints you to represent someone like Bryan Kohberger, you become, in effect, his legal custodian. You kind of become his slave in some ways. You can advise, you can resist, you can argue with him, but you can't just walk away. The Constitution guarantees him the right to counsel at every stage of the criminal process, even after conviction. And in a case this complex, the court is not going to let new counsel come in cold to handle post-sentencing issues. So yes, you could say Ann Taylor and her team are essentially trapped. Trapped in a system that keeps its defense attorneys tethered to the very person who made their state and their own lives a living nightmare for the last 3 years. And while they're trapped, the taxpayers are trapped too. Because all of this, every hour spent drafting that restitution motion, every meeting, every filing, every email is funded by the public. Kohberger isn't paying his lawyers. Idaho is. And if you're a resident of Idaho, you are. Again, if you're angry about this, I hear you. I am too. It is the system you need to fix. Getting angry at the attorneys and calling them names and they're money hungry and they're just doing this for money. No, they're not. They are not, and you're ignorant for saying that. Understand what the system is, how it works, and what you're talking about if you're going to argue it. The system that allows that doesn't differentiate between necessary legal work and motions that just keep a killer relevant. It doesn't. Because it's not a frivolous filing. It is not the attorney's fault. It's structural failure. The Idaho Public Defense Commission certifies attorneys like Taylor to handle death penalty cases. Once appointed, they have to stay on through sentencing and post-conviction motions unless the court relieves them. Like I said, it is meant to protect defendants' rights to ensure consistency and fairness and continuity in a case. That makes sense when someone's fate is still being decided. But once a killer like Kohberger admits guilt and takes a plea that spares his life, that same rule starts working against the public. Oh, this is horrible. We need to change it. Should we? Because there's a lot of cases where people are wrongly convicted. It creates a situation where the system itself becomes the weapon, where a convicted murderer can keep forcing the state to pay for months and motions that serve no purpose beyond satisfying his own need for control. And make no mistake, that's what this is, control. This is Kohberger doing what he's always done. When he committed those murders, he controlled the scene, the timing, the victim's vulnerability. When he was arrested, he tried to control the narrative. Silent in court, eyes down, just calculated enough to make people wonder what he was thinking. And now, locked in his cell, he's controlling the only thing he still can, the process. By filing motions like this one, he stays relevant. He keeps the court system orbiting around him, keeps the victims' families from moving on, and keeps his own attorneys chained to his will. You can almost hear the echo of his academic arrogance in it. The criminology student who studied what drives offenders to act now gets to act out the theory in real time, using the justice system as his laboratory. He doesn't need a weapon anymore. He has a legal team bound by law to keep doing his bidding, whether they like it or not. And that's the real tragedy of the phase of the case where we're in right now. The attorneys aren't villains here. They're professionals caught in an ethical trap, sworn to uphold the Constitution even when it means helping a man the whole world knows is guilty. They can't refuse his demands unless those demands are so outrageous that they violate the law, and this restitution motion, as grotesque as it is, doesn't cross that line. It is legal. It's bad faith, it's cruel, but it's legal. And the court will let it happen. Attorneys will file it, the state will respond, the judge will schedule another hearing, and the taxpayers will pay for every hour of it. That's a system we have, one that guarantees even the worst among us the right to counsel, but never stops to ask what happens when that right becomes a weapon against the rest of us. Kohberger has figured out how to keep manipulating a system that was built to protect fairness, not enable obsession. He's hijacked it, bending it to his own narcissistic rhythm. And the attorneys bound to him, people like Taylor and her team, are now unwilling players in that ongoing performance. They didn't choose this. The system chooses it for them. That's why this isn't a story about bad lawyers. It's a story about a justice system that doesn't know how to shut itself off. A system that guarantees due process but doesn't know when to declare enough. Because when even a man like Bryan Kohberger confesses, even after he's sentenced, even after he's locked away for life, the process doesn't end. It just grinds forward, feeding itself with time, money, and misery. The irony is brutal. Kohberger's defense team can't withdraw without permission, the families can't move on without peace, and the taxpayers can't stop paying without reform. The only person who gets what he wants is Bryan Kohberger, the man who built his entire identity around control, now controlling everyone else from a prison cell. It's not justice, it's bureaucracy enabling evil. And until the system changes, until there's a way for attorneys to be released when a case is truly over, we'll keep seeing stories like this. Motions that serve no one, hearings that reopen wounds, a system so committed to fairness that it ends up punishing the wrong people. Xana, Ethan, Kaylee, and Maddie are the victims here. Their parents shouldn't have to see their children's names dragged through the court filings anymore, and the attorneys forced to keep filing Kohberger's behalf shouldn't have to carry that burden either. Because when justice becomes servitude, when even the lawyers are prisoners of procedure, the system stops serving the living and starts serving the dead. Give me your thoughts in the comments section here on the podcast channel or on YouTube. Just search Hidden Killers with Tony Brueski and you'll find us right there. Is this something that should be reformed? I mean, it's a valid question. Because yes, it is being hijacked. It is being used inappropriately, but not illegally. And if you put certain restrictions on it, you may also restrict it where it could be used correctly. Still being used legally, because this is a legal use of it. But if you start restricting it, you not only shut the door, obviously, to misuse, but you also shut the door to justified use, to people who really do need the help of their attorneys because they've been wrongfully convicted, because something happened, and we see it all too often. Look at the yogurt shop murders. Look at, if you believe, Richard Allen, Delphi. Do we just shut the door on everyone as soon as they're convicted because the jury always has it right? I'm not here to argue for Kohberger. I'm here to make you think. Give me your thoughts in the comments. And please do press subscribe so you don't miss any of our coverage here. I'm Tony Brueski. We'll talk again real.
Want more on this case and others? Then press subscribe now and don't miss a moment of true crime coverage from Tony Brueski and the Hidden Killers podcast. Is Hidden Killers with Tony Brueski. Here now, Tony Brueski.
There's something strange about silence in a courtroom that never got used. The Idaho courtroom that was supposed to hold Bryan Kohberger's trial. The stage for months of evidence, testimony, and confrontation. The microphone never switched on. The exhibits never flickered across the screen. The jury never saw a single frame of what the state had prepared to prove. And yet, piece by piece, those materials are now leaking out. Not as spectacle, but as a slow, grim inventory of what the public missed when the plea deal shut the door. When prosecutors first laid out their case plan, it was clinical by design. The DNA, the cell phone trail, and the white Hyundai Elantra. No grand motive narrative, no melodrama, just proof. In newly unsealed filings, we can see how they meant to do it. Exhibit logs show nearly 500 potential pieces of evidence, crime scene photos, maps of the King Road house, recorded interviews, 911 call transcripts, and hours of body cam footage. Some of it will remain sealed forever, and that's a good thing. An October 1st order barred the release of any image showing a victim's body or blood, calling them too prejudicial, too invasive. And there's no reason we need to see them. But what's left paints a chilling, methodical picture. The knife sheath found beside Maddie Mogen's body carried a single male DNA profile, the genetic match that investigators say broke the case open. Digital evidence mapped Kohberger's phone traveling towards Moscow the night of November 12th into the early hours of November 13th, before it briefly vanished from the network between 2:47 and 4 a.m., reappearing moments after the murders, heading back towards Pullman. Surveillance cameras captured a white Hyundai Elantra circling the neighborhood, headlights cutting through the early morning fog. Those are the cornerstones the jury would have seen. Then came the human side, the brutality described in autopsy summaries, now partially unsealed this month. Xana Kernodle, more than 50 stab wounds and fractured bones of the skull. Maddie Mogen, defensive wounds and the unmistakable hilt imprint of a knife pressed into her chest. Kaylee Goncalves, grievous facial wounds, and Ethan Chapin, struck with what examiners call frenzied force. It's almost impossible to read, even now. But those details underscore how prosecutors were building the death penalty argument before the plea deal erased it. There were also the quiet pieces, things that add texture but never make headlines. Unsealed police memos describe strange activity at the house in the weeks before the murders. The front door found ajar, noises upstairs, a sense of being watched. Those records meant to establish premeditation, that whoever planned this knew that door, that layout, and those habits. All of it. Years of digital breadcrumbs, DNA work, and forensic reconstructions now exists as paper, not testimony. A story that could prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, but will never be tested in front of 12 people sworn to listen. The newly released witness list reads more like a map of Kohberger's collapsing world. Prosecutors didn't plan to call his parents. They were never central. But his sister Amanda was. Her name appears on the state's October 11th filing, just days before her brother suddenly agreed to 4 consecutive life sentences. The state said she would testify about his behavior before and after the killings, how he acted the summer he moved to Pullman, and again that December when he returned to Pennsylvania. She wasn't going to accuse him of anything. She was there for context. Still, the symbolism is hard to ignore. The family name inside the witness box. And then came the professors from Washington State University. John Snyder, the criminology teacher for whom Kohberger worked as a teaching assistant, told investigators his student was rigid, argumentative, socially off-putting. Snyder said he'd considered removing him from the program before the arrest ever happened. If Amelia Pedno, another professor, told police she worried about how Kohberger treated female students and that he'd once emailed her about a paper, The Charisma of Evil, Ted Bundy, and the Study of Psychopathy. According to newly unsealed campus records, Kohberger downloaded that paper 3 times from the university archive. That detail now feels a little prophetic, because if the trial had gone forward, prosecutors intended to draw that line. A fascination with Bundy that went beyond academic curiosity. Photos recovered from Kohberger's phone show him hiking near Mount Rainier, the same area where Bundy dumped at least one victim in 1974. In one selfie, his expression is eerily deliberate. Behind him, a memorial stone marking the mountain's first climb. Investigators noticed the framing, too deliberate to be chance. The Bundy parallels. Mount Rainier, the sorority house attack, the targeting of women, all would have helped the state argue motive without ever saying a word. And while prosecutors assembled that pattern of life, the defense had its own army of specialists waiting in the wings. 16 experts, DNA, cell phone forensics, crime scene reconstructionist, computer analysis, even a psychiatrist. Their strategy was clear from discovery filings: dismantle the state's forensics and imply more than one weapon, more than one person, without an alibi. It was the only path left. The trial would have been a brutal chess match, science versus suggestion. Instead, a signature on a plea deal ended the game before the first move. Buried among the pretrial records is a small but revealing file, the psychological evaluation commissioned by the defense. Dr. Eileen Ryan, a forensic psychiatrist at Ohio State University, was hired to study Kohberger's family dynamic. She interviewed his parents and two sisters, both individually and as a group, in late of 2024. Why the family? Because the defense needed to humanize him, to argue that obsession, not evil, drove him. Ryan specializes in obsessive-compulsive disorder. Her notes mention ritualistic organization, control fixation, and interpersonal rigidity. The most interesting part isn't what she said about Bryan, it's what she didn't. She focused almost entirely on the women in his life, his mother, Mary Ann, and his sisters, Amanda and Melissa. His father didn't get an individual session. Psychologists who reviewed the structure say that choice suggests the defense was exploring how his relationships with women formed or fractured long before the murders. It's also worth noting Kohberger's mother once wrote an opinion piece criticizing the death penalty and used Ted Bundy as her example. Prosecutors had that article in their mitigation file. They likely would have used it to challenge any argument that her son was misunderstood rather than malignant. In a trial, that small essay could have become one of the most haunting pieces of irony in recent memory. Now, instead of the courtroom, we get the slow paperwork of a man adjusting to permanent confinement. At Idaho Maximum Security Institution, Kohberger is in administrative segregation. A single cell, minimal contact. The October 20th grievance log, released through public records request, shows 9 complaints in 2 months. Temperature too low, portions too small, correction staff failing to follow policy. Staff describe him as precise, insistent, and argumentative. The same words professors once used. Earlier this month, state officials finally named the employee who leaked surveillance video of him pacing his cell and performing push-ups. That worker resigned. No criminal charges. Since then, the Department of Correction has implemented a single-channel communications rule, meaning no one can speak to media without approval. It's an institutional muzzle born from embarrassment. Meanwhile, prosecutors refiled a 99-year no-contact order forbidding Kohberger from any communication with the victims' families. Not letters, not emails, not proxy messages through third parties. The family supported it unanimously. And inside prison, he's kept off all programming lists. No group therapy, no work detail. Officials told NBC News he spends most hours reading case law, filing written corrections to procedural memos, and requesting more legal pads. It's the same personality loop. Control through paperwork. Even in isolation, he's still trying to win arguments no one is having. The plea deal spared Idaho the cost and chaos of a death penalty trial, but it also sealed off one of the things people crave most in cases like this: truth in sequence. Trials don't just convict, they explain. They show us how the pieces fit together, and they force both sides to confront each other under light. Now what we get are the drips of redacted evidence, professors' recollections, and FOIA documents that read like fragments of a confession we'll never hear. The October Unseals gave us enough to know what the state had. DNA that anchored the story. Witnesses ready to describe his social unraveling, psychological evaluations that hint at obsession, and a digital trail that caught him circling the victim's house again and again. But what they can't give us is a why. The human motive that a prosecutor can only unpack on a witness stand where evidence becomes narrative. Instead, Kohberger's life has moved from courtroom to cell block, a controlled environment where he can argue with no one but the walls. He'll spend decades cataloging grievances, debating regulations, maybe one day writing about justice from the inside. The irony is that for a man who studied criminology, he's now become a textbook. His own case cited in lectures he'll never hear. And the rest of us are left reading footnotes to a trial that never happened. Evidence locked away, witnesses never sworn, a fascination with Ted Bundy left to speculation, and redacted photos. In the end, Bryan Kohberger's story didn't close with a verdict. It simply stopped. A freeze frame of a system that proved its point without saying a single word. Give me your thoughts in the comments. I keep going back to, should they have gone forward with this trial? Should they have put more restrictions on the plea deal? I'd say without a doubt the second. They should have forced him to explain in the same way BTK did. They gave him way too much grace and allowed him to slip into the cracks of the prison system without having to face the bright light of reality and give him a chance to collapse in front of all of us. But would he have? That would have been the risk. Because if you look at the BTK case, another one that he studied, modeled himself after in some ways, that confession in that courtroom in Wichita, it was cold, it was calculated, and it showed no remorse. Would that have been the best thing for those families? Or what took place, the confrontation that they were able to make with him, especially Olivia? Still, that's, I think, the best moment of the year in terms of courtroom theatrics and raw emotion coming to the surface. Maybe that was the best. Give me your thoughts in the comments section. If you're not already there, search Hidden Killers with Tony Brueski. You'll find us on YouTube, and you can comment there. Make that same search wherever you get podcasts and take us with you wherever you go. And hit subscribe, please. Until next time, I'm Tony Brueski. We'll talk again.
Want more on this case and others? Then press subscribe now and don't miss a moment of true crime coverage from Tony Brueski and the Hidden Killers podcast.
culpable for this kind of an event. And so they looked towards the school administrator. My understanding is they actually tried to loop in the school board, who was ultimately, I think, dismissed from the civil case. So they're trying to get creative, and this is yet another bizarre wrinkle to the school shooting, pandemic that we have in our country, and yet another problem that we have to try to solve as part of this larger problem.
This seems like a simple one. Don't be a dumbass. I mean, if somebody is telling you there is a child, they have a gun. We think they have a gun. Maybe they have a gun. We're not quite sure. There's something questionable that child has. But the school did an act. And I also question this. And I'm not blaming the teachers who did what they were supposed to do. They had to go to the vice principal and say, okay, we think this. What on earth is going on in our country where if you're the teacher and you think the child has a gun, that you can't be the first one to go check out that bag? That somehow that child's rights supersede you going and saying, let me see your bag. This is where we live right now, where a teacher is in fear of repercussions towards them for acting in a manner that could protect not only that child, but all the other kids around and themselves, because there could be repercussions. Well, you might be violating their rights. You might be doing this. You might be doing this. This is insane. I mean, it's adults running around in fear of the rights of a 6-year-old who might have a fucking gun? I mean, what planet did this become normal on, and how the hell did we get here?
There is sometimes a departure between constitutional jurisprudence and common sense, because what we have here is, I think perhaps the concern by the teacher was that the child does have a Fourth Amendment right. It is less of a Fourth Amendment right against unreasonable searches and seizures than they would have outside of the school. They have less rights, but still some rights. And the school, if it's a public school, then they're state actors. And so they're kind of thinking to themselves, perhaps, hey, I don't want to violate this kid's Fourth Amendment rights and then be stuck with a lawsuit. But gosh, you got to weigh the potential evils here. And the other evil is that somebody gets shot in a school, which is happening with alarming frequency increasingly. So there is sort of a tension between, hey, we want to make sure we're protecting rights, but then again, what about this common sense piece? What about this emerging problem in society? Should the Constitution and its jurisprudence kind of catch up to that? I think is a question a lot of people are asking.
If we go into a concert, if you go into any sort of busy place, they will check your bag. I can't go, you're violating my Fourth Amendment rights. You can't check my bag. You just have to trust me that everything's going to be A-okay. Why on earth? How is this not applicable in a school setting?
So I think the distinction that the school would say exists is that, at a concert, you're talking about private entities, private individuals, and no one has a Fourth Amendment right against private individuals trying to search your shit, but you do have a right against public entities trying to search your stuff. So in the school context, the Fourth Amendment applies, whereas at a private concert with private entities, it doesn't. I'm not saying that that's how it should be. I'm saying that that's how the current jurisprudence is laid out. And even though those students have a diminished right in against searches and seizures, there are still some rights there. But should we be empowering teachers to be able to take direct action on a serious lethal threat that could be imminent? I mean, I think the answer is of course. And so we've got to sort of make some legal changes to authorize that.
Well, and one of the things that they said, and I did some research on this, the district said that being shot isn't a normal teaching risk. I would like to argue that because
it isn't.
344 shootings since Columbine, that pushes that into the level of it is a risk. It's something that we've been seeing. I'm not going to call it a trend, but I'm going to say that, well, it's more than one. So it's a possibility. Yep, you're saying there's a chance? You're damn right there's a chance.
No, Stacey, I'm totally with you because, and I think if you ask nearly any actual teacher, one of my best friends, Joey Cohen, is a teacher, and you better believe that that goes through his head
Damn right.
regularly. And so to say that this isn't sort of a normal work hazard of being a teacher, I think is detached from the reality of this, I will call it an emerging trend in school shootings that we're seeing.
Okay.
And yeah, like the last 24 said, maybe in the 80s it might have been different, but 2025, this is the reality.
Well, how did we go from we're going to be really vigilant, we're going to keep all the kids safe, to, well, you all have these rights and we don't want to hurt your feelings? Or, I mean, it's insane. After Columbine, I was a senior when Columbine happened. I know you're a few years younger than me, Eric, but you would have been in school too when that was going on. Yeah. So you lived through being in the education system for many of the years after that. I got the fuck out, thank God. But it was it was disturbing. But we didn't care. Nobody thought, well, my rights are being violated, they're going to check my backpack. But they started checking everybody's backpack. You walked in the building, it was like walking into an airport for a little while, where they're checking shit. And it was just the norm. Nobody was like, well, my rights are being violated. What the hell changed where this was just common sense, where we're going to make sure that this stuff is being checked so nobody gets hurt, no harm, no foul. But we're now at a place where we can't even look in a first grader's backpack to make sure there's nothing dangerous in there. I mean, that basically says right now, my daughter going off to school, all these kids come in with their backpacks, teachers have no right to look in them no matter what, even when they suspect there might be something there that's dangerous because it might violate their Fourth Amendment right?
You know, I hear you, Tony, for sure. And the way that I would sort of suggest is the Fourth Amendment protects against, it doesn't protect against all searches and seizures, just seizures that are unreasonable.
Right.
And my God, isn't it reasonable if you've received warnings that this kid might have a firearm and there's all these school shootings happening, to go in and search that kid's backpack? I think it's absolutely reasonable. And even if the school district has certain policies and procedures in place, there should be exceptions that allow them to deviate from those in the event of an emergent potential situation like this. So I don't think there would have been anything legally wrong with the teacher searching the bag. I understand they were trying to adhere to protocol, but sometimes you got to adhere to common sense.
Well, and this is a chance where this is a time where that actually failed. So if they were saying, well, we were trying to, preserve the child's rights, well, you fucked up. I'm just going to say that. And this teacher is probably sitting there going, well, you know what? I give up. So at some point, we've got to come into the middle that, you know what? Tommy, we think has a gun. We're going to pull him out, take him to the counselor's office, not make a scene, not embarrass him, but we're going to check out this perceived threat and see what's going on. We need to get back to this point where we're protecting other people. I'm sorry, I'm just on a rant. I'm getting mad. I'm getting really pissed.
Then we sit and we wonder, well, why is it hard to get teachers? Why do we have bad teachers?
We're not protecting them.
And there's plenty of wonderful teachers, but when you create an environment for healthy, intelligent adults that is going to be insanely risky, that is not going to work with them to help educate the children, it's going to work against them at every turn they take, you're going to end up with bottom of the barrel folks applying to be teachers. And
you're
the good ones
Tony, you're going to be safer working at a Starbucks drive-through taking latte orders than teaching our next generation of kids.
And making more money. Yeah.
Correct.
And that's the sad reality of our education system. Again, something we do nothing to fix in this country, a glaring red problem. And we're just like, well, those teachers. Like, no, that administration. Because 99% of these problems start with the administration operating out of fear of being sued. But maybe that's part of it too. I mean, and there are plenty of times to sue a school district. There certainly are. But but we also then get to the point where we're just solely operating on fear of lawsuits and not fear of children being killed.
Right.
And we're just not going to take the appropriate actions and hope that everything turns out good at the the end of the day. And that seems to be how this went in this case.
Yeah, totally. And to Gen Z 367's comment, being a teacher is so difficult at this point. They're constantly being scrutinized and ridiculed and condemned, and there are these parameters set on how they can even instruct their given discipline. And on top of that, think about is to teach anybody anything. I'm trying to teach my brother how to change something on my car, and he's an adult with a master's degree. That's hard as heck. Think about teaching a bunch of teenagers ancient history or something. And so they have a hard enough job as it is, and now they have to deal with a lethal threat to their lives and perhaps being handcuffed in their ability to respond to it. Big problem.
They are, and that's the insanity of it. It is such a broken system, and that's why it's getting harder and harder to find good teachers out there. And the good ones a lot of them have left. There's still several standing, but there's very few. I'm in my early 40s, and I can tell you, of all the people I knew from high school that went in, just like this woman did here, who went in and got shot. You go in rosy eyes, wanting to do the right thing. Thank God we have people who are willing to be teachers and put up with children and have the patience to put up with these children, and the horrible parents that are out there of these children and deal with those repercussions and still try to provide guidance. Thank God they exist. But at some point, there is a breaking point for every one of them. And I can say I'd probably 80 to 90% of the people I grew up with, again, I'm only in my early 40s, have left teaching because of shit like this, because the administrations are not using any sort of common sense, because it is so set up basically to operate out of fear and to not truly educate the kid and to make sure that they get certain scores in certain places so they get their funding. And I get it. You need your funding. But I mean, there's so many things messed up. I could go on and on and on about how broken our system is, where, I mean, especially with funding, like, okay, well, you have the worst scores. Let's give you the least funding. Maybe that should be a sign they need more funding because they need help, not less help. But that's how our system works. The schools that have the best scores, that end up having the best teachers because they have the best pay, end up getting tons of resources and tons of money. And the schools that are struggling, it's like, oh, you're down, let's keep kicking you. That's how the United States education system works. That's why we're in the problem we're in today. That's why we have the young adults that we have today. Poor decision makers, because this is the system they came up in, the system that fostered it. This is not a broken system. This is how the system is designed to work right now. It's our job to say, this is broken. We need to change it. It is currently working as designed. And that, I think, is something nobody wants to accept, because it takes some courage, it takes work, it takes effort, it takes energy to change something as difficult as this whole thing is.
Yeah, most definitely. And I think, funding is a huge issue. I think sometimes even political overreach in education on both sides can be a problem. I think some of those ideologies can sort of try to be infused into curriculums and into resources that students have and may no longer have. It can result in the students being less accommodated, having a slanted view on certain issues. And sometimes when there is not enough support for these students, especially those dealing with issues due to funding, due to politics, due to whatever reason, that contributes as well to the problem.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's an endless cycle, and it's like, okay, well, we fix this, but we got to fix. I mean, look at our conversation. It's like, yeah, well, if we did this, you still got this over here, and this, and then it just becomes, and at the end of the day, what do you do? And then, and we're paying our teachers unbelievably low wages. I mean, shockingly low wages. I've seen some of the entry-level salaries just around here. We're talking like $19,000 on some positions.
Again, Starbucks work in the drive-thru. I'm not dissing Starbucks drive-thru.
That's like you make more panhandling outside of Starbucks, probably.
Yeah.
Honest to God. And then we want you to, we want to entrust you with the well-being of our young people. And it's not to say that somebody, very well-intentioned, that money, I'll live in poverty because I believe in what I'm doing. Yeah, they will for so long. But then even, you've been there a long time when you get up around the scale and you're still not high. You're still not in many districts.
New people that are taking over the senior people's salary. It's repulsive.
Broken. It is so broken. It is so repulsive. And again, everyone is living in fear in every school district. Every person who has a job, they are living in fear of doing it wrong. And then they end up making the wrong choices because of that fear that they're living in. I experienced it just the other week where I got a call from my school saying, hey, we found this out. Your daughter reported this. And just to let you know, we let these other parents know what she found out. And that's it. Like, you're a mandatory reporter. Correct me if I'm wrong. Yes, I am. So what does that mean? Well, it means we have to report and you're calling the parents? Yes, we're just going to do that.
That's not reporting.
I'm sorry. Let's back up for a moment here. Mandatory reporter. What does that actually mean? What does it mean? And are you going to call? Well, we normally, yeah. So I blame and I don't blame people for those sort of decisions because there's a reason that there's a hesitancy to report certain things. Typically because something the administration said to them, because they don't want that bad mark on them. They don't want that bad PR. They don't want to be looked at as this. They don't want to be looked at as that. And that's how you get this fucking cycle that goes on forever. Look at the Devil's Den case. I mean, look at how they basically shuffle teachers around in so many districts like they do Catholic priests that molest kids. I mean, it's so freaking broken. It's insane. And it's an icky subject, so people don't like to talk about it either. But we did, and I'm glad we saved the world today. And,
I was going to say, did we fix anything?
No, but hopefully we opened up some people's eyes that didn't realize just how broken this shit show is. Eric Faddis, as always, thank you for coming on. Defense attorney, former prosecutor, Varner Faddis Law in Denver. Thank you so much for coming on, as always, Eric.
Great to be with you.
All right. Until next time, for Eric, Stacy, and Todd, I'm Tony Brueski. We'll talk again real soon.
Want more on this case and others? Then press subscribe now and don't miss a moment of true crime coverage from Tony Brueski and the Hidden Killers podcast.